on the way home.
Brilliant.
If we ever get back home.
Yeah, that ain't happening.
It's not. Although watching Middlesbrough's not. My mate got the manager's job when I was one of our school friends, but not doing very well.
Who's the manager?
Jonathan Woodgate.
Oh, okay, yeah. Struggling?
Yeah, a little bit.
Are they going to survive the championship?
Yeah, hopefully it doesn't restart, and then this points per game will keep them up, so that'll be all right. If it restarts, they might not.
Ouch.
All right, so what we'll do is get started. Again, my name is Brad Evans with Ohio North. Appreciate everybody taking the time to jump on the webinar today. We wanted to put this together, Tom Turner and myself, who's on the call. This is in response to providing some content for the players and the parents. But also, as you look through the participant list, there's a lot of coaches on here too. And I think the sharing of information at this time is probably very useful and helpful for everybody. A lot of this content, we're going to spend time talking about potentially some of the rules changes that COVID have forced the different divisions into and the strategies that are growing because of it. But obviously, any recruiting question is up for grabs. Just a couple of things as we get going. And we'll talk about the different panelists. For Ron Rainey from Division I, just be mindful by rule, Ron is not able to discuss what maybe Dartmouth does specifically that is different or best practices for them in terms of recruiting. The Division I rules means he has to state recruiting from a general perspective, and he can reiterate that on his own a little bit more. I just wanted to put that out there to cover him for the NCAA rules. Panelists, very quickly, you can see on the screen Mark Batman from Ohio Northern University, Division III. Obviously, Mark's got tremendous experience and success, both on the field and off the field. Good coach, involved in the club game. Great person to have on a panel. We've worked together in this capacity several times, so it's good to have Mark. As you see, Ron Rainey, Dartmouth College. Ron's, I think, Ron, 20 years of Division I coaching experience, if that's true.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Something like that. Don't age me too much.
Yeah, well, I've known Ron forever today. Again, success on the field, an excellent soccer coach, a good teacher, and a good friend as well. And Andy Harth from Walsh University, just down the road from where I live, Division II men. As you can see, and has spent quite a bit of time in Division II, has great experience in being able to guide us in this discussion as it pertains to that level and the rules. So we want to thank Andy for taking the time to join us. So what I want to do is just kick us off from the beginning. And Mark, why don't you take the first question and just give us a sense of, obviously with COVID and Division III, can you just tell us what's changed in terms of recruiting? What's the same? What are the rules for the Division III level?
Yeah, no problem. So essentially, probably just like most of America, everything is virtual for us. Fortunately, our 2020s class was done, in February. So now it's virtual conversations with 21s. Our university has done a great job of preparing virtual meetings for our 2021s. And since May 12th, the campus has reopened to start taking visitors. Obviously following all the health protocols issued by the governor, but they're limiting, I think, campus visits to 6 families per day. So we haven't had anybody, come to campus yet. I think our first one is next week, so it'll be definitely interesting. My first visit ever in a mask, so we'll see how it goes. But they are definitely, I think, being cautious, but also want to keep moving forward. It's probably the right term that I keep hearing from administration.
And Mark, is that the consistent around the country, Division III? It's just open anywhere? It's just up to the local state to determine whether visits are can happen?
Yeah, it's up to every single institution to decide how they want to keep moving forward. That's what, you know, the governor has said, and not every single Division III school is open right now. Fortunately, our location allows us to, we're a little bit remote. So usually that goes against us, but for the first time since I've been there, this has been a huge positive of Ada, Ohio. So, you know, fortunately we have 0 cases on campus, 0 cases with faculty, staff, anybody. So, you know, that's probably allowed us to be a little bit more aggressive with, you know, the reopening.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Andy, why don't you take the Division II and explain nationally where Division II is in terms of dead periods and approaching quiet periods. And this would be applicable for men or women.
Yeah, so we were put into a dead period that expires on the 31st of May. So that was essentially, you know, all in person, on campus, off campus was removed for us. Again, it was, you know, probably not too different to what Mark was dealing with. You know, they did open up, allow us the Zoom calls, and then it was, you know, it was back to spend your life behind the screen. We are now moving in from June 1st, taking it from a dead period to a quiet period, which is going to allow us in-person on-campus recruiting. So that will obviously be based upon we're not going to be open for visitors, so essentially isn't going to have a huge impact on us in that way. But we will, as we open, be allowed to, you know, to bring people to campus and host camps, things like that, back on campus from June 1st. Fortunately, same with us, we were pretty much done with our 2020 class. The interesting part of it has been with the 9 players we've got coming in, 6 of them are internationals, and it's been with embassies being closed and borders being closed. We're obviously trying to navigate the visa process and different things like that. So that's been the new thing for us, trying to navigate that. We have benefited a little bit in a couple of guys taking SATs, and obviously from a recruiting standpoint, for this year the SAT is going to be waived. So, you know, so it has helped a couple of the guys. You know, they would have been fine, but it's obviously just removed that barrier as well. But then in addition to that, they have just put a law in that we can, if club season starts while we're on this quiet period and we're coaching club, we can get back involved in the club scene as long as we don't use it as an evaluation or recruiting period, which, you know, that's obviously will be what it is.
Excellent. Thank you. Ron, do you want to talk about nationally how Division I has responded to this?
Yeah, similar. We're in a dead period right now until June 30th, so no off-campus recruiting or on-campus recruiting. We've kind of kicked that can down the road. Like, we've gotten, at first it was May 1st, then it went to May 31st, and now it's gone to June 30th, and it might extend a little bit more. But again, no on campus, no off campus. As Andy said also, though, if coaches are involved with club, they can work with their club teams on our end right now.
So Ron, as a follow-up to that, what has been the discussion in Division I in regards to ID camps or prospect camps? Is this something, I know it's a big part of the recruiting process. What's the discussion regarding those?
You know, it's interesting. I think it's probably school by school, state by state. And I know a lot have shut theirs down in June and July. You don't see many, but I believe that if a school gives an okay, you might see some of those start, especially one day ID things maybe open up as we get into the fall. In that same way, I've looked around and there are, like right now in Texas, it sounds like their camps are still on as planned. Like when you look at some of the schools there for July, and don't know if they're holding on to see what happens there. And NCA wise, if a school allows you to do camps, I mean, it doesn't fall under those recruiting rules. They'd be.
And then it just becomes a decision for a family of whether they're going to take the opportunity or risk to travel to these, which puts the families in an interesting spot. Mark, and Andy alluded to the SAT and ACT being basically not a part of the admissions process currently. Is that something you're seeing in Division III, whether it be for this year or even subsequent years?
Not for this year. There's been some conversation of students that wanted to retake and trying to navigate how all of that works. I think it's going to be really interesting looking at the next year's class to see how all of that, kind of going off what Andy said, how all that is going to move forward. There's just a lot of talk and not really a whole lot of decisions have been made. I think, listening to both Andy and Ron, we're kind of operating at 5 different levels: best case scenario for the fall and worst case scenario, and kind of moving forward and having a bunch of different what ifs and plans for every single level. And kind of like what Ron was alluding to, it's really hard to plan when, we don't know, right? Camps are the same situation, but as far as, the ACT and SATs, it hasn't been a whole lot of discussion, at least within our campus. But I'm sure it's going to be something that's going to raise the president's eyebrows a little bit, in admissions eyebrows.
Lots of work for
And I think, Mark, maybe you can discuss this, because one of the things that's different level to level and is maybe sometimes the smaller schools are enrollment driven. And so removing barriers to getting students involved is important with ACT and SATs. Are schools, or have you heard about schools where academic scholarships are based in those tests and you can't retest? What's been the discussion, or maybe either at your school or across the country with that?
Yeah, so traditionally it's a pretty hard line, at least with our admissions process and certain scholarship levels. There's usually 4 to 5 scholarship levels in between our 5 colleges that we have on campus. And I'm not saying that those lines aren't hard anymore, but I think they're looking at overall bigger picture. They might be weighing in on GPA a little bit more heavy than what they were in the past, than a test score that wasn't able to be retaken. So I think they're doing their due diligence with that and looking at broader picture, broader landscape. They're also looking at some creative ways to, I think, increase enrollment a little bit. And one of those, especially with the times, is increasing the distance for commuters, right? I think that's a really interesting thing and probably unique for, schools that might be enrollment driven. Our student body is just under 4,000. But, if we had, a little bit bigger of a commuter population, let's say that goes from 30 miles to 60 miles, that's a completely different type of potential student that I think they could attract. Right? So they're starting to be a little bit more creative, and I wish they would have done this, 10 years ago, but, makes our jobs easier a little bit maybe, but I think it's good that they're looking at all of this now, right? And trying to find ways to solve the problem rather than be reactive.
Yeah. And I think that's an important piece for a lot of private schools, that the cost of attendance tend to be a little higher, and there's a financial aid and things, but that commuter thing could be a big impact when you take out the cost of room and board for a family. I mean, that's a significant chunk of expense, so that could certainly sway things. Andy, if you could talk a little bit about, you said that you're done with your 2020s, but there could be players who are 2021s. men or women, Division II, who right now or their whole spring got kind of blown up with showcases and events and games and opportunities to be seen. What would the advice be for players in that situation?
Yeah, I just think as well, tying on to what Max said as well, getting creative with that. We're done with the 2020s, but we've just gone to a creative kind of. They announced we're going to 8-week semesters now, moving forward, basically following a grad school program for undergrad, with the goal of getting out in 2.7 years. If you follow all semesters, the first 8 weeks is going to be free room and board for freshmen and transfers. So I think people are looking at that to how can we encourage people that it's going to be okay to be back on campus. So that may have an impact on a little bit more with our 2020 group, that we may add a couple more players. I think obviously on the men's side, and having spent some time at Division 1 on the women's side as well, our recruiting is that little bit later than, we're not seeing the 9th, 10th grade people wanting to make decisions on the men's side necessarily. So I think it is going to be a little bit of a unique situation for us. We obviously do a little bit of due diligence, that we'd started making the pool of our 2021s, but the evaluation period is going to be tough. I think it is going to be how can we kind of do a little bit of a better process with using video. We try not to do much more in video than do we go out to watch that player. Well, maybe we're going to have to be a little bit more open to video. And then for our international recruiting, it's how's the travel going to impact us. We're getting a lot of, we've seen a lot of, we do a lot of recruiting in Canada, and even politically looking at players are now making the decision that they may not want to come down to the US in the next year or two. So I think it's just going to be vital of how do we recreate the markets and that we recruit from, and how can we do a little bit better with video, and and maybe a little bit more of the virtual stuff like this until we find options, and then and then maybe looking at once things do get cleared up, can we get some teams on campus in a little mini tournament or whatever it is, just so we can get our recruiting caught up. But it's definitely going to be an interest.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that international piece is going to be fascinating going forward. It's not because it's not like the U.S. has got right now a low number of cases, so there may be fear coming this way, let alone people, the U.S. trying to keep people on the other side. So interesting. I think, is that John Orozco who has the question about virtual ID camps? Jay Burrow? You want to ask that one of Ron?
I've seen some things on the virtual ID camps. I mean, we haven't looked that way. With our camp program and ID camps or the overnight camps, I think that like we want people to have a great soccer experience. I think at the college level, there's also a reality of having that be part of an identification program. I mean, I wouldn't totally feel comfortable in a camp situation, a virtual camp situation, to give somebody, we'd be able to give them some thoughts, but thoughts as far as fitting in with a college program, I think would be pretty difficult. If somebody's able to do that, more power to them. But I think that would be incredibly difficult from a logistics standpoint. That's kind of how I feel in that way. But like Andy just said, I mean, trying to figure out what this new normal is, or how long it'll take to get everybody back going and training and those type of things, it might open up doors kind of for everything right now. But I would not use those virtual ID camps probably to make final decisions on players that I hadn't seen play quite a bit before.
To follow up with that, Ron, so one of the questions that I do these recruiting seminars fairly frequently, the questions from the parents are often about, what is the value of an ID camp? Why would somebody want to send their student to an ID camp, and what do they expect to get from it? Is it to get a final evaluation and to hopefully, if it's at a Division I level where scholarship money is involved, to get a scholarship offer? Is it, what's the purpose of or what would you see the purpose of Division I ID camps?
Over this next year and a half, it might be a little bit of everything, because again, with kind of taking away a chunk of 4 or 5 months of going out and seeing some schools unofficially or things like that, it might start being something where people are able to see a campus, work with staff, maybe see some of the other people that are interested in the school. And again, I mean, we're in an age where we try to talk to our athletes about not comparing themselves too much, because you want to get the best out of yourself and get better every day. But at some point that is recruiting. That's a part of recruiting, to have to make some of those decisions. Again, it'll, like, we're going to try to, in this whole thing, preach patience for 21s, patience for 22s, because this just isn't normal. This is not the game plan of normal recruiting right now. And it's going to take a little longer, and it's going to take a little longer for those athletes to really show what they can do. You go through 4 or 5 months without getting stuck in or taking pressure, getting tackled, all those different types of things. It's going to take a little bit to get back up to speed. One of the things that has been amazing, I think, during all this is seeing, hopefully this has led to a love of soccer for a lot of the individuals out there. I mean, you see so many things now on Instagram, on all the different platforms of kids doing things on their own. And that's something, as coaches, we've preached to kids to do things on their own. And now, out of necessity, they have to. But I have a couple daughters who play soccer, and I've never seen them do this much stuff on their own with the ball, which is great.
Excellent. Appreciate that, Ron. So what I want to do is unmute, is it T. Mancy, to ask your question to Mark.
Yeah, it's Mancini. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Yeah, my son, he's still a youngster, but I mean, he's playing in, what's left of the DA. But as we go forward and as he gets older, my question is, should we be creating a player profile on a Top Drawer or a Got Soccer or one of those sites out there? If so, which ones are the best, or which ones would you recommend, if you can recommend any?
So, I think most relationships with clubs will have, those sites available to their players. For me personally, and Andy, since he's on the boys side, might look at information a little bit differently. But for me, we get that information when we go to events anyway. I like it if it's a introductory email and gives me a little bit of detail. But you can, I feel like you can go ahead and create that on your own, and you wouldn't need that website to do it for you. The one nice thing about the website is it does have databases of colleges and college coaches and contact information and things like that. But that's, again, those are things that you can potentially do on your own, especially if the list of schools is particularly small that, they're interested in, and it's not going to take too much legwork to find that contact info.
Yeah, I think, right along there with what Mark said, I think it's, as coaches, a lot of us are doing the same thing during this time, right? We're watching different sessions, we're watching videos, we're creating things from looking at other people's ideas. I think it's, you can look out there at those sites, you can look at what they create, and obviously, take the best bits of each one and, and create your own and get them selected to the, the small group of schools that you're looking at. I wouldn't necessarily think there's a huge need to be out on the national databases for everything. If it's focusing where you want to be in the region you want to be in.
Ron, did you want to jump in on that one as well?
I think Mark, both good points, and Mark, I mean, you know your children best. If they're focused in on a small group of schools, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, I would just create your own email and not do one of those sites. But it might be a time, again, with everything going on, to cast a wider net. And that those are good things with Top Drawer Got Soccer, where they can break down the size of schools, the locations, those type of things, and then the list might be a little bit bigger. But as soon as it becomes a little bit more manageable, probably the best thing to do is to reach out to those coaches on an individual basis.
Yeah, I think they, it's one thing to identify, and it's another to create a relationship. So it depends what you're using those sites for, I think, would be the question. And then you've got to balance out cost with these things. And if it's something where it's expensive and you can do the work yourself with the resources on the internet, then maybe that's a direction to look. There is a question from somebody marked user, so I've unmuted that person. If you want to go ahead and ask that question and maybe direct it to one of the 3 coaches. Or maybe not, and I can throw it out there maybe to Andy. Would you guys be interested in taking a look at a player at this time? How can a coach like me reach you guys?
Yeah, I think obviously it's the one thing which this has given us, right? Is has given us time, which time with maybe with family, with whatever it is that we don't normally get. So we've definitely been as a staff meeting over Zoom once, twice a week to discuss any emails we've had in, videos, different things like that. So I think definitely we're always willing to take a look at a player, and getting that initial email. And I think this has been one of the benefits of this for the recruiting process has been getting a little bit more virtually and getting on Zooms with some of the kids that we're recruiting, and you almost create a little bit more of a connection. I think with the international guys, you end up, we've been doing this for the last 2 or 3 years over Skype, WhatsApp, FaceTime, whatever it may be, and creating that connection. Maybe we didn't do it enough with players that were domestic based, even local guys. It seems to be a text message more than anything. So so I think definitely we're always open to to looking and doing the best we can, but getting an email to us, a phone call, and maybe getting one of these little virtual chats set up with a family has definitely been would be a good way to go about it. I think it's definitely we've been making sure we've had leadership groups and small groups of players, families together, throughout the last 6 weeks and I think the connection's has been huge.
Yeah, that's going to be an important piece. And I think I'm going to piggyback a question off of that before we go back to the chat room to Ron. So what are you getting from incoming players, not only because they have uncertainty over what their spring experience has been in their own environment, but now they're facing going into a new college experience, probably further away from home for you. What, how are you or how are Division I schools looking at that? Are they extending preseason, shortening preseasons? What's the discussion?
I think everything's out on the table right now, but not a ton of answers. With our incoming players, like with a lot of the uncertainty, they just kind of want to know what to expect. The NCAA has, and they probably smartly allowed some more things with those incoming players, like Zooms or chats and stuff like that just allow coaches probably to look at them virtually and really talk through some of those things with them. My gut is, like I said, I think this year, if there's going to be a year where like the return to play once we get on campus, the NCAA I would think would have to mandate something this year. to make sure, or probably smart coaches are going to realize maybe, doing a gauntlet test on the first day of preseason might not be the smartest thing to do. And just kind of to acclimate people to each other and build like a proper preseason. And that might be, that might give a lot of kids opportunities, as you go 2 or 3 weeks. And when you start playing games, you might have to play a few more people just as everybody gets their game fitness back.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a big challenge for you guys. At all levels, they're going to have to manage those return to play, particularly for freshmen with such a big jump. So I'm going to put this one out there for Mark and Andy, and I'm going to pull Tammy Daly's and John Orozco have sort of questions about ID camps. I think if I'm understanding John, you're saying that high school does not permit ID camp attendance during your season of eligibility. So, what about ID camps? Are there changes in rules coming? And Andy and Mark are more local here, so they can address that.
Yeah,
Good.
I think
Well, basically what I'm saying to you right there is that Ohio high school doesn't allow players in season to participate in any ID camp while the player is in his high school season. And I know based on my conversations with other states that doesn't happen in other states. So I wondered how difficult is that for Mark and Andy when you're trying to recruit high school players in Ohio when they can't come to an ID camp while their high school team is in season.
I think for us at Division II, during season, we can't have tryouts or a player try out or train with us from the day that they're in high school until the day that their season is officially over. So that's not going to make a huge difference to us. But we're still all just working on an up in the air. Who knows what's going to go on? What rules are going to change? So I think everything's going to be fluid. I think for us, we don't run an ID camp until kind of a June time of year anyway, which we're more looking at sophomores and juniors. So so that won't change too much for us. But I think we're just doing everything on a day-to-day basis where we've seen things change from being in a dead period till X date, and then suddenly it's a quiet period, and then suddenly it's back to a dead period. So I think everything's just so fluid for us that who knows where we're going to be at.
Yeah, so to piggyback off Andy a little bit, we're kind of similar. I don't recall us offering an ID event or camp during season, and because our seasons obviously conflict. But due to things and maybe players not being or having opportunity to be seen in the spring, who knows what the high school association is going to do. They may say, hey, you can attend too. I have a problem with that if I'm a high school coach and 2 or 3 of my kids go on a Sunday after we've already had 2 games that week and potentially have injuries, something like that. So I think Andy kind of hit on the head. I think probably being flexible with rule changes and, along with being flexible is having common sense of what we're able to do and what is realistic, right? Not just for our programs, but for the student athletes, kind of what Ron was touching on as well with the acclimatization period.
Yeah, and I actually have a follow-up question to that. And this is going to touch on maybe an age issue for Ron and I. I remember a time back in the day where we actively recruited players during the fall of their senior season because official visit dates and, the contact wasn't permitted until the summer prior to the senior year. So you were just getting to know kids during their senior year. You were going out and to watch them. And so this is open for anybody, but maybe to Mark and Andy a little bit more. Do you see or forecast that coaches are going to get back to going to some high school games this fall because of what was missed during the spring?
Yeah, I think for us, with obviously you know, knowing where we're located, Brad, is we generally we've created in the past where, you know, kind of figured that on a Tuesday night, a lot of the local high schools play home games or play games Tuesday night, and that was a night we selected to train at 8 o'clock, which then would, you know, allow the staff to get out and it's not just a recruitment thing, it's obviously being seen in the community as well. With us being fortunate to be able to get to, you know, probably 6 to 8 relatively solid high school programs in a 15-minute drive. So that's something we've been doing over the last 2 to 3 years anyway. But I think, you know, this year it's definitely going to be a little bit more of a, I don't want to say serious, because we obviously always are, you know, taking notes and maybe evaluating players we've already seen, but it might be a way that we have to do a little bit more of the initial recruiting.
Yeah, and to kind of touch on what Ron was saying with the age groups, you know, I can certainly see that, Brad, happening with the 21s and 22s, right? I mean, you know, getting out and getting second and third if we haven't already had those evaluation opportunities, and getting out and seeing what's happening with their high school teams, right? And you're right. I mean, 10, 12 years ago, we were all at 3 different high school games a week while we're still competing. And now that has changed a little bit with just the landscape of how we recruit and, you know, in the winter and spring now. But I could see definitely some transition happening to where, you know, if we're allowed, right, if there's going to be spectators in there or whatever, that, you know, there's going to be some more college coaches at those events.
Yeah, I think we actually experienced a little bit this year with, you know, the signing day kind of being dropped on us a little bit unknown with the change that we, you know, that in November we obviously hit that in the guys' side where, you know, players were waiting for those offers from maybe Division I schools and they didn't come at that time. That, you know, when we were in the initial playoffs, we were out back at high school games 2 and 3 nights a week to, you know, to follow up with those players. So I think it hit us a little bit this year as well.
Excellent. I'm going to unmute Matt Diepenbrock. Matt, good to have you with us. You want to go ahead and ask your question, and maybe do you have 1 or 2 of the coaches that you want to direct that to?
Thanks, Brad. No, it's not really directed at anyone in particular. You know, I coach some ODP teams out in Ohio South and stuff, and I've always wondered how different the recruiting process is for, you know, domestic students versus international students. I don't know if internationally, if they have something like an ODP or a DA program that you guys follow. And then also go along with that, are the DA and ODP players here domestically, are they prepared well enough versus the international kids that you see? Thank you.
Ron, why don't you hit that one first, and we'll just go through the divisions because it sort of hits everybody in a different way.
You know, I think that on women's soccer and women's college soccer is a pretty athletic, fast game where even your teams that keep the ball a ton are still at times a little bit direct. Probably the biggest thing that we see with some of the internationals we recruit is there is a pretty nice tactical knowledge of the game. A good base on the women's side. Technically, they'll come over here sometimes and in the first week say, "Holy smokes, that was like a million miles an hour faster than what I'm used to." And again, this is the kids that are coming over on the women's side are probably coming out of a system where they're playing with limited subs and doing different things there, which hasn't totally reached here, even though the DA did did some of those things with their programs. So that's one of the biggest things. I believe the kids who come over on the women's side are prepared. I think that the biggest thing that they have to get used to is the speed of the American game, and that's sometimes the biggest thing that our players coming out of high school, the American kids, have to get used to at the college level. But it's something that is evident there with some of our internationals. Andy it would be interesting to hear on the men's side, especially what they deal with going into college.
Yeah, I think obviously from the recruiting, it's not necessarily following like a DA or an ODP. I think, you know, obviously myself personally, having grown up in England, having the connections of guys that I played with who are now coaching the academy level or the different levels. But then, you know, finally one of the big things what's happened is 7 or 8 of the recruiting companies finally got together and created a system where they actually all work together and run their events in a week to 10 days now, where you can hit them all. In the past, it was a bit of a hit or miss. You fly over to England and then suddenly 3 events on the same day. You pick the one that you've had success at in the past and you go to it. Whereas now, between the International Alliance, have created a program where you've got 2 days in Norway, 2 days in Sweden, 2 days in England, and they're all back to back, where you can see all the players. So that's kind of the way we've gone in the past. Now, obviously, that is going to change. I know one of the biggest companies that we worked with has actually fell foul to the coronavirus, and they've ceased operating. So so that's going to change that for us. With regard to the guys coming in, I think obviously the level that we recruit from overseas, it's technically and physically the players come in just fine. The one thing which they, even here in Ohio, they don't kind of acclimatize to the heat quick enough. That's a big situation. A lot of the guys coming out from overseas are not used to playing the Thursday Saturday schedule. So that's something we see right away in the freshman year, that they're used to maybe having a game on a Saturday and then they've got 2 or 3 days off and then 2 or 3 days training before the next game. So that's definitely something that we have to be aware of. I think technically, obviously tactically, and the passion for the game is something that we see they don't have any issue. And I think one of the biggest things, and it is adjusting now. A lot of the internationals coming over, they haven't really experienced a good level of strength and conditioning. They come in and some of the guys who are even coming out of, some of the higher end professional academies, get in a weight room and they're not familiar with, a lot of the things that we're doing in the weight room, or they're not familiar with lifting during season to maintain. So that's definitely something we do see as well.
And then Matt, on the Division III level, there's not a whole lot of international, women's soccer or even men's soccer players, right? And I think, Ron and Andy probably, they know that market and landscape way better. But I think the challenge that most Division III schools have is the affordability piece for the international students to come over and make it realistic for them to afford, the tuition and room and board and things like that, unless that individual school has certain relationships or has specific, academic scholarships that are applied to international students, right? Kind of getting back and circling back to what, we were talking earlier about creative ways of recruiting. I know at least our administration is looking more and more at, Canadian women's soccer players, because I've been at ONU for 17 years and, we get emails from them that are only 2 hours from campus, 3 hours from campus. And I know that it's just not going to work, but now they're being a little bit more open to, trying to be creative to make it a little bit more affordable for them, so that this could be a little bit more realistic. So within this time, you might see some changes like that too.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation with international recruiting. Again, that's a brave new world. We'll learn a lot about it in the coming months and years. Ron, there's a couple of questions in the chat room that deal with rules, so I'll just try and combine them and you can give some perspective. The first one has to do with the contact date of prior to the junior year, that mid-June contact date. And then the second question, obviously, somebody's referencing that proposal of splitting the college season instead of it being a fall-only season, splitting it into fall, spring, and their timing of pushing that proposal is unfortunate. But maybe you can give some perspective and an update on those.
Yeah, on the for the last year, they changed up some of the rules with contacts to to try to slow the process down, but now June 15th is the date for a rising junior. So a 2022 can be contacted by phone. And between June 15th and August 1st, those phone contacts can occur. And then August 1st was when unofficial visits could start taking place. Unofficial or official visits could start taking place. Again, all that stuff has been now pushed back a little bit. The June 15th is still the date for phone calls this year, unless the NCAA decides to change that. This will be the first year that a class of students will, so a lot of the 2022s probably haven't talked to a coach yet. Some may have before this rule changed, but a lot haven't. So it'll be interesting to see kind of this process. And then in future years, and again, future years where we wouldn't be dealing with the pandemic, it will be interesting to see if this does help slow things down, because I think we all probably agree, like we want the student athletes to be developing as people, developing as players, doing that through their freshman and sophomore year, and not thinking about looking at colleges, because we want them to be present with their high school coaches, present with their club coaches, and just improving. It'll be interesting again to see how that works out with phone calls this year. Being able to talk to kids and maybe haven't seen them play. So that's one rule. And I do think in future years, it will help kind of make the process a little bit saner for some of the student athletes. The other rule with the split season, that was something that was pushed mostly by men's teams. On the women's side, it's not in the it is not in the docket as far as being looked at. So they moved that whole process with the ADs to next year. So it's been delayed for 1 year. It probably just kind of a bridge too far right now. But again, on the women's side, there wasn't as much momentum. There has been a little more interest on the women's side, and then there's always been a little bit of an interest in just stretching the season out, 4 or 5 weeks, because again, Andy made that comment about players come overseas, playing 2 games in 3 days is hard, and having some type of recovery is a part. Back 20 games in 12, 13 weeks is just difficult. So on the men's side, that proposal about splitting things has been moved to next spring. The women's coaches right now have been we've been kind of looking at it from the outside to see probably what happens, and then decide if that's a direction we would want to try to go. But there is, I think, an interest in stretching things out for the good of the student athlete, and we'd want to then see the data probably of injuries coming down, and hopefully the experience getting better for people.
Good. As we're getting close to our time, I want to make sure we have a chance here, and we'll go Mark, Andy, and Ron. I'm curious if you could share sort of in an encapsulated form, how would you guide a prospective student athlete on determining their best fit? What advice would you give them on determining fit? And start with Mark, go to Andy, and then finish up with Ron.
Yeah, interesting. I always look at it 3 different areas, right? Academically, is it the place that's going to get you to where you want to be when you're an adult? Meaning, whatever that next phase of life is, law school, grad school, med school, whatever, is that institution going to get you to where you want to be in the time frame that's going to make it realistic for you to do that? Meaning 4 years, 5 years, whatever that situation is, right? Is that academic place going to challenge you and then, prepare you? Second piece, socially, right? You want your parents to come to games. If that's the case, then don't go 12 hours away. You know, if you want a bigger school, great. If that's the environment that you feel like you can learn in, perfect, right? Socially, it's got to be someplace that you feel safe, that you're comfortable, right? But you can also grow independently, kind of like what Ron was talking about, develop, right? And the third piece, at least for us, you know, is soccer a part of that, right? Soccer, you know, if our girls aren't going and playing professionally, they're going to go off and be pharmacists and engineers and hopefully graduate on time and donate right away. That's what we want. So, so soccer for them is just a part of that experience. Do we want to win every single time? Yep. You know, do we want to win a national championship at some point? Yep. But I think, you know, for me, and when I talk about our potential student athletes finding the right fit, because that's the term that always gets used. Always tell them to look at academics first. Socially, is it a place that you're going to be happy at? And then where do you fit in with the soccer piece? You know, because that experience is going to be different. If you talk to 10 different coaches with the same kid, she might have a different role in every single program, right? And at the end of the day, be happy. Whatever you choose to do, Division 1, 2, 3, whatever, none of that is right, wrong, good or bad. Just whatever you choose to do, just make sure you're getting the most out of it and be happy. That's all I got. All right.
I think for us, it's, you know, that pretty much answers, you know, what we're putting in. I think maybe you haven't been fortunate to coach, obviously, Division 1, 2, and 3. I think that maybe the little bit of difference is at Division 2, you know, you're finding that middle ground where obviously your academics is still the number one priority, but then you are, you know, taking a little bit more where it is going to be a little more 50-50 soccer and academics. That you're going to have the extended season, you're going to have the extended spring season. So I think obviously having, you know, that idea of what level of commitment do you want? You know, is it can be a little bit of a grind in the spring when you're not playing the competitive games. So is that, you know, do you want that lifestyle to still be, you know, part of your spring and your academic experience as well? But I think we're very similar to what Mark said. Obviously, then we're also, you know, looking at the different cultural aspect, having, you know, 50% of the roster being domestic players and the other half being from 7 or 8 different countries, you know, telling that different cultural experience that, you know, we have a lot of the guys who will travel overseas for summers or guys who will stay here with families of our current players. You know, so what's the little bit of the X factor that you have off the field and gaining your experiences, you know, in life that way as well.
Those are 2 great answers, and I think Mark hits it right on the head. Andy hits it right on the head, and I would say allow the process to happen. Take the opportunity to see the teams play of schools that you're interested in, and then be honest about it. I mean, again, there's all different levels out there. There's all different teams out there. People that have a really good experience are probably ones that are realistic kind of with where they fit and who they are. And so they'll do pretty well. And a school's Instagram feed, that ain't reality. That's not reality. So like everybody can put a great post together and things like that. But you want to, like Mark said, you want to pick a school because you say, hey, academically, this is the place, this is the setting I want to be in for 4 years. And that piece about being happy, you want to be happy during those 4 years because those are the people that I think are then ready to step out in the world and take some nice next steps. And if you can't be happy in college, I mean, we tell people all the time, real life is a lot harder. Real life is a lot harder. So we think that's important as well. But I do think now with streaming and those type of things, it really gives people an opportunity to see the teams that they're interested in play, you know, 3, 4, or 5 times, and you start getting a feel that if you can fit, you know, with that level. And then constantly letting coaches know when and where you're going to be playing. So it gives coaches a chance to see somebody play 2, 3, 4 times and have a good idea as well.
Excellent answers, everyone. So to finish it up, maybe Tom, if you do you want to jump in here and have anything to say to the panelists, that would be great.
Well, I was going to take it off in another direction, but we ran out of time because you had so many questions to fill in. But it's been great to catch up with everybody. Appreciate you all taking time for sure. Appreciate folk coming in who are interested. I just hope we all have a season this fall because it's getting a bit long talking about what we're going to do and the questions that keep coming up are there's just no direction at this point. So I really hope we all have a season and we all get a chance to go out and do what we love most, instead of talking about soccer, actually doing something about it on the field. Any last questions from the attendees? No, well, I would just say thank you. It's been great to see you again, Ron Rainey. I don't think we've connected in, I hate to think, it's 10 years, 15 years. Andy and Mark, it's been a lot more recent, but I'm glad you're surviving in college because 26 years is a pretty good track record, my friend.
Well, it's Mark to be 17 years at one school is amazing. Yeah. I always stick and move a little bit. Yeah, so
we still have some work to do, so it's hard to leave, you know. So haven't hit that main goal yet. We're close.
Nice.
So yeah, again, on behalf of Ohio North, thanks for everybody for attending, particularly our panelists. Thanks for your time and your insights. It's been fantastic. Hopefully we'll, as Tom said, everybody will be on a field playing soccer as opposed to just chatting about it on a Zoom call. So we'll continue our Ohio North, look for announcements for future webinars as we've had a good run so far. And stay safe, everybody, and hopefully we'll see you all again soon.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. Get to go watch Bundesliga.
When is the next Bundesliga game?
Oh, right.
We haven't been watching Belarus live every weekend.
Some real scintillating games in Belarus.
There's only so many old college games you can watch, right?
Man, I'm loving Saturday mornings of the old EPL like goals of the year. I'm loving it. Oh, I remember that. I remember this.
And the shirts are like this.
Oh, I love it. Collars up. Oh yeah, yeah. You got the old school World Cup, Adidas World Cups on.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I texted a couple of relatives.
Dallas, you still wear those, don't you, when you coach?
Who was that?
World Cups, the screw-ins?
For sure.
Dallas. Dallas has got the custom Puma stuff. It's gonna have the. It's gonna go old school. It'll be good.
Yeah.
Love it. Love it.
So there is
text over. Go on, Brett.
There's really no concrete responses about return to play for anybody at this point. If I'm hearing from the colleges, I just saw they announced some of the schools are going to push the semesters earlier, hit Thanksgiving, and close down until mid-January.
I have a boy who's going to South Carolina, and that's what they just said. So at Thanksgiving, they're going to send everybody home. But I believe me, we were ecstatic, Margaret and I, when they said that they were going to hold something on campus. We want him out of the house. So we were happy that they did that. But that's probably a pretty good idea to limit the amount of times people are going home and coming back. So at South Carolina, they said no fall break. And then at Thanksgiving, just head out. Like the one thing, and I didn't say it on the call, that's true a little bit with some of the ID camp stuff is like at some point, we might limit what we do until after our season, because heaven forbid you would have an ID camp and then somebody had COVID and it shuts down a campus. Or like, what if you're at an SEC school, they figure out a way to do football, and then the women's soccer program has an ID camp and it shuts down the thing? I mean, that wouldn't be that. Like some schools might say, hey, we ain't doing that until we get a little bit further out or things like that.
Yeah, it's like your own team, right? It's like the whole the kid who gets mono and you're just on campus and you're like, stay away from my group.
Yeah, Ron, like what